Let me give you an example. Um, in 1997, there was what ended up being a very famous chess game between Garry Kasparov, the gentleman you see in the picture on the right, who at the time was the undefeated chess grandmaster and world champion since, I think, 1985. So he'd been reigning for over 12 years. And the opponent was Deep Blue, a computer programmed by IBM for the sole purpose of playing chess. And now what was amazing is that even though in 1996, Garry Kasparov had won over Deep Blue, Deep Blue got a giant tune-up, and then the year later actually managed to win one game over Garry Kasparov. In fact, it turns out Kasparov made one mistake in the last game, in the opening part of the game, and Deep Blue won. Now, the whole world heralded this as a massive feat of engineering. I mean, that a computer can beat a human, in fact, the grandmaster at a game that we often think of as the pinnacle of human intelligence. It is amazing. It's a great feat of engineering. But to me, what is amazing is the other way around. What is amazing is that the human mind can actually stand up and, for the most part, beat a computer who has an enormous computational advantage over what we can do. See, think of it this way. The game of chess is extremely computationally complex, meaning the number of possibilities in chess are enormous. Think of it this way. By the time a game does two moves, that game can unfold in some 70,000+ different possibilities. So if you were to think of two moves and how many possibilities and how many different games could unfold from there, we're talking about 70,000+. By the third move, the number of games that can unfold from there, 9 million. At a fourth move, 318 million possible games can unfold. That's the number of possibilities. Somebody calculated that by the 13th move, we are in the trillions, close to 70 trillion possible games, possible different games, could unfold by the 13th move. Now, what is amazing is how differently Deep Blue and Garry Kasparov play this game. See, Deep Blue derives its chess prowess really by brute force computing power. Deep Blue was created for the sole purpose of playing chess. It was massively integrated, massively parallel. It was based on, I think, 30 different nodes, each containing very fast microprocessors. It was enhanced with, special purpose chess chips. It had stored, I think, thousands of chess games, thousands of possible moves. It had a library for the opening game, for the middle game, for the end game. So what it could do is, in other words, Deep Blue could evaluate 200 million possibilities per second. So what it would do is it would go through all the possible moves it could do, all the possible counter moves that Garry Kasparov could do based on its libraries, and it would do this over 6 or 7 different it would project forward 6 or 7 different moves. In fact, at times it would go through up to, I think, 8 or 9. So really, Deep Blue, if you think of it, is really nothing more than your solar power plastic calculator just on steroids. Deep Blue is thinking about this game in a radically different way than Garry Kasparov is. Deep Blue just goes over all the possibilities. As I said, brute force computer power. It evaluates all the possibilities. Not only on top of that, after having evaluated all these possibilities, what it would do is it had a very sophisticated algorithm to pick out of all these billions and trillions of possibilities it went through. It would have an algorithm made, I think, of 8,000 different parts to pick the best move for the next move. So Deep Blue has the computational power to face the computational complexity of the game of chess. It looks at every possible move, down to 8 or more moves, and then picks the single best one. Now, I'm sure that Garry Kasparov can think forward a couple moves, and typically they say that grandmasters can sort of think forward a few moves, but there's no way Garry Kasparov can even approximate by far the computational power of Deep Blue. And yet, Garry Kasparov, with, honestly, comparatively speaking, such a small computational power, is still able to somehow find, one or two best moves that are the most promising. Maybe they're not the best one if you could analyze billions of moves at the same, in the fraction of a second, but they certainly allowed him, for the most part, to win most games. In fact, most games in that span of 15 years, and most games against Deep Blue, with the exception of the last one. Somehow, our cognitive system, faced with such a massive computational complexity in its environment, is able, without having to go through, every single one of these options, is still able to figure out, the one or two sort of most desirable moves, or the one or two most promising moves. That, to me, is incredible. On top of it, consider that Deep Blue can only do one thing and is very specialized, can only play chess. Deep Blue doesn't even have, a little LED to turn on and off in sign of celebration if it wins. It doesn't know it wins when it wins. It doesn't feel happy because it won. It doesn't feel unhappy because it lost. Couldn't care less. Garry Kasparov, on the other hand, can play chess that way, and then can do a huge array of other behaviors that, our species is able to do. That, to me, is incredible. So if you see it this way, fundamental aspect in the study of cognitive psychology and the research in cognitive psychology is understanding what are these guiding principles that allow you, faced with a possible infinity of interpretations, of decisions to make, of possibilities, what are the guiding principles that our minds have? What are the biases that our minds have that allow us, faced with this computational complexity, to choose, maybe not the best, but, a pretty good, satisfactory, or promising option? So if you want, you can see every single chapter in this book, every single topic we will tackle, is really a search and an effort to understand what are these guiding principles that our minds have evolved over evolutionary timescales that allow us to face and cope very successfully with the complexity of our environment. And mind you, it's not just that we survive. We are the smartest species that we know of. There's no doubt that the things that we have managed to do on this earth, definitely the most sophisticated possible. I mean, we launch stuff in space. We're on the verge of colonizing other countries. We put stuff in space so that I can type something on my phone and send it to somebody else. We invented computers. We developed sophisticated societies of millions of people interacting and cooperating. It's amazing. And so to me, what is so amazing is that our minds, despite us not being Deep Blue, when faced with the incredible computational complexity and incredible ambiguity of the environment, we've developed shortcuts, biases, and sort of guiding principles that allow us to survive and thrive in this world. So every single chapter that we will cover will be an exercise in understanding what are the guiding principles that our minds have developed to tackle each of these problems.